I imagine this one is going to sever a nerve or two, but I just saw Evil Dead Rise, and there's so much I feel I need to say. Let's start with the plot. Up-and-coming guitar technician Beth decides to take a pregnancy test in a filthy club bathroom. Finding she is indeed up the duff, she suddenly feels that all hope is lost and abandons her job and goes to visit her sister Ellie in her condemned apartment complex. We are then introduced to Ellie and her children, the androgynous Bridget and her politically correct hobbies.
Have you seen my favorite black t-shirt? I need it for the Labor Day protest tomorrow.
Femboy and aspiring DJ Danny, and cute little serial killer to be, Cassie. The family reunion, which results in exchanging woes, is cut short when an earthquake reveals a sealed bank vault under the complex's garage. Young Danny climbs down and finds a Book of the Dead, and its translations conveniently committed to vinyl. How fortuitous! Danny, of course, being the pillock he is, gets blood on the book and plays the records out loud at deafening volumes. Seriously, it's no wonder the building is condemned, because the volume this kid pumps his tunes out at must be seriously fucking up the foundations. And obviously, all hell breaks loose. The mother is invaded by the evil force, in a rather non-invasive way for an Evil Dead flick. The newly formed Mummy Dearest Deadite terrorises the family and few remaining residents, creating more Deadites until the movie's blood-soaked conclusion. The film, in all, is a mixed bag. Director Lee Cronin commits to the serious tone that was employed in the 2013 reboot. The film is grimy, gritty, and deals with the depressing themes of the broken-down family structure, with the cast of mopey individuals trying to make the best of their lot. However, there are moments of random goofy humour, all callbacks to Evil Dead 2, that are thrown out in the middle of the action, and they just don't land. The film looks great. The cinematography really brings out every grimy detail of the surroundings and has good use of oppressive lighting and shadows. Alyssa Sutherland really bites into the possessed mummy role and does everything she can with what's on offer. The effects are so-so. There are literally gallons of blood on display, gushing everywhere, but very little real viscera, with kills that are rather weak effects-wise, and a lack of Evil Dead mandatory dismemberments. We get a lot of the usual stabs and impalings, but just when the film looks like it's about to do something really cool, it pulls its punches. The characters are all rather two-dimensional and unrelatable, as we never really get past surface level appearances. The two older kids are presented to superficially appease the woke social media types, who were rather more prominent when this film was in production, but they never really told that line. The continued trend of fighting pregnant ladies in Hollywood movies seems to be some kind of current fetish that I just don't understand, and it's on display again here. And it doesn't really bring anything to the story in a meaningful way, other than I'm oppressed and I'm fighting back. I hate to break it to you, Hollywood, but being pregnant is nothing new. I know you're all too busy to actually make babies and you just import them, but real women have been knocking that shit out of the park for thousands of years. The soundtrack can be rather impressive. It's accompanied by a sinister score and some nice creative touches, but also relies on sudden noise-driven jump scares and tinnitus-inducing drones. The acting is really only as good as the material. The dialogue ranges from hackneyed to wince-inducing.
Don't you think Mom looks just like one of those pictures from that book?
From all you titties fucking parasites.
For a brisk 90-minute piece, the film isn't very kinetic and bogs down in places, even later in the picture. The stakes never really reach a peak, with no real character interaction, intergroup dynamics or tension that arise from that. In fact, there's barely any form of the characters coming together to try to survive, with all the supporting characters introduced in a short time and pretty much immediately wiped out. There is a lot of obvious foreshadowing to the deaths, so much so it kills any tension, and it's clear who's next, effectively letting the audience in on the rhythm of the movie.
You could have taken my head off.
It wouldn't have been a clean decapitation with these blades. You'd just scramble your face up real good.
We do get some Evil Dead universe expanding moments, however fleeting, to bridge the piece with its predecessors. Was the earthquake a result of Ash's deal with Ruby in Ash vs Evil Dead? But the film spends far too much time towing the line rather than crossing it, riding the fence in an attempt to appease as many people as possible while sacrificing its own identity in the process. And that leads me into spoiler territory for some rants, so skip ahead if you don't want anything ruined, but this is just some of the stuff that bugged me the most. The The film actually starts off at a cabin by a lake, because of course it's Evil Dead and somehow they felt obligated to do it. This leads to a disconnect to the rest of the film until the very final scene clumsily connects it to the rest of the picture. A scene so dumb it seems to only exist to justify getting the cabin into the film. The film has no positive male characters. The main family is, of course, being abandoned by their asshole dad, and Beth's baby daddy is never even mentioned, other than it being implied she considers what's happened a mistake, albeit possibly a happy one at the end. If there was one thing that ever made Evil Dead really stand out from the crowd, was that it was one of the very few horror franchises with a male lead, which is good not just because it gives the male audience someone they can relate to, but making a male lead terrified up the stakes in an era where men were supposed to be tough as nails. Maybe not so much now. The very few male characters are all supporting characters that are pretty much all wiped out in one scene, with most of the action off screen, with one even choking to death on an eyeball. Which brings me to the humour. There are several humorous callbacks to Evil Dead peppered throughout the movie, but these gags just don't land in the serious gritty tone of the film. The eyeball scene was more silly than laugh out loud gross, and delivering lines like
Come get some.
only work when it's played high energy goofy. One of the reasons I found the 2013 reboot so successful is that it didn't try to blend elements that worked against each other. It was just balls to the wall horror, almost how the original film may have been had it been produced with a bigger budget with more modern techniques. Here the punches are pulled constantly, which brings me to the cheese grater scene. This should really have been the movie's pencil in the ankle scene. It could have been notorious how my deranged little heart lifted when Deadeye grabbed a cheese grater, but I was let down when all it resulted in was a quick surface abrasion. That should have been a frantic terror-filled assault that had grated skin and flesh flying everywhere, and people would have talked about it for years. There's a certain lack of originality to the entire piece, with a heavy feeling of being more than inspired by 1986's Barbie Demon Possession sequel, Demons 2, or the little more recent Wreck. Some scenes are highly comparable to other films, such as a shot from 2013's Evil Dead, The Shining, and The Gate. But for the biggest issue with the film, it's the characters. The characters never really reach any potential. The main protagonist's experience as a guitar technician has her perform the godly feat of powering a turntable with batteries to try and glean further info from the records, but that doesn't really get her anywhere. The rest of the main cast hardly go beyond the depth of a Twitter bio. And horror only ever truly works when you care about the characters. They don't need to be fully fleshed out, but you need to have a sense of what they're all about. That being said, as I mentioned, Sutherland chews up the scenery with glee, and the actress who portrays little Cassie is quite endearing as a scrappy little rascal. Now after all that, I realise it sounds like I hated the film. And I did, as an Evil Dead film. It just doesn't live up to the calibre of the franchise. If it was just another standalone horror flick, I think I would be more forgiving. Even the audience I saw it with seemed very mixed on the picture. Most people seemed rather bored and didn't really give any kind of response. The younger members of the audience seemed to really dig it, despite claiming on their way out it wasn't as good as the last one. And a group of around 5 people just got up and quietly left, not to return 20 minutes before the end of the film, which I don't think I've ever seen happen before. As it is, I actually can't believe I'm here giving such a negative review to an Evil Dead picture, given how close the franchise has been to my heart for over the last 30 years. In the end, I'm giving it 2.5 chainsaws out of 5. At the risk of repeating myself, it toes the line, but never crosses it. A journeyman Evil Dead, if ever there was one.
What is this, Danny?